At the start of 2024, Elgato released two new video capture cards, the 4K-X and the 4K Pro, and Elgato were kind enough to send me both of these new cards to me at launch. These new cards support HDMI 2.1 and support higher frame rates and higher resolutions, which makes them a great match for PC gamers and those that play on Xbox Series S and X or PlayStation 5. They can also be used to record footage from older games consoles, as well as handhelds, tablets, smartphones, cameras, and other devices. I've spent over 3 months with these capture cards, so in this video, I would like to give you my honest opinion about them and talk about what these cards can and cannot do. Before we proceed, if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to watch my full review of the Elgato HD60X. The video has a detailed analysis of Elgato's old flagship card, shows Elgato's capture utility applications for Mac and Windows, and explains features such as high dynamic range and lookup table filters. Moving forward, I will assume you have an understanding of these topics. The 4K-X is Elgato's latest USB capture device, succeeding the Elgato HD60X, which was released in 2022. It's a plug-and-play device that works with Mac, Windows, and iPad. Apart from the HDMI in and out ports swapping sides, the 4K-X looks identical to the HD60X. As someone who owns both cards, it is difficult to know which card is which at a glance, so I find myself checking the front of the capture card to make sure. The 4K-X continues to feature an analog audio line in port, variable refresh rate pass-through and capture, and support for HDR10 pass-through and capture. From a hardware point of view, the main difference is the upgrade from HDMI 2.0 to HDMI 2.1 and the improved Type-C connection. Elgato's previous USB capture cards used a 5 gigabits per second Type-C connection, but the 4K-X utilises a USB 3.2 Gen 2 connection in order to increase bandwidth support to 10 gigabits per second. So the 4K-X utilises a Type-C to Type-C cable instead of a Type-C to Type-A cable. This is why the 4K-X is able to record at higher resolutions and frame rates, such as 4K at 60 FPS, 4K and 1440p at 144 FPS, and 1080p at 240 FPS. The 4K Pro is Elgato's latest PCI Express card, succeeding the 4K60 Pro Mark II card that was released in 2019. The card is compatible with PCs that use Windows as their operating system. I love the versatility that Elgato's USB capture cards offer, as the cards can be moved around easily between desktop computers and laptops, but I always have an Elgato PCI Express capture card in my PC. Firstly, because it means one less cable in my recording setup, and secondly, because it doesn't eat into my motherboard's USB bandwidth, which is important to me as I frequently max out my USB bandwidth because I use so many webcams and capture cards in my recording setup. Both the 4K Pro and older 4K60 Pro utilise a PCI Express 2.0 X4 connection, and apart from Elgato's branding, they look physically identical. Internally, however, the newer 4K Pro card supports HDMI 2.1 instead of HDMI 2.0. Like the 4K-X, the 4K Pro supports variable refresh rate pass-through and capture, and support for HDR10 pass-through and capture. The card can record at up to 4K at 60 FPS, 1440p at 144 FPS, and 1080p at 240 FPS, and allows video pass-through up to a ridiculous 8K at 60 FPS. All Elgato capture cards come packaged in Elgato's easy-to-open blue box with the tearaway strip at the top. When you open up the 4K-X box, you'll be immediately presented with the 4K-X. On one side, there is a power indicator and the 3.5mm audio port. On the other side, it has HDMI in, a Type-C USB port, and HDMI out. The box also includes a short safety instructions manual, a 2-meter 8K HDMI cable, and a 1.5-meter USB 3.2 Type-C to Type-C cable. Both of these cables are high-quality braided cables and a marked improvement on what was provided in previous years. When you open up the box of the 4K Pro, you will see the PCI Express card in a sealed bag. It has an HDMI in and HDMI out port on the slot bracket. And if you've never seen one of Elgato's PCI Express capture cards before, you'll be surprised at how small the 4K Pro card is. This is a good thing, as it means the card can be easily inserted into small, medium or large PC builds. The box also contains a short safety instructions manual and a 2-meter high quality 8K HDMI cable. It's worth noting that the low profile slot bracket that was previously included with the 4K 60 Pro Mark II is not included with the 4K Pro, but the accessory can still be purchased directly from Elgato. The 4K-X works in the same way as other Elgato USB capture devices, such as the HD60X and HD60S Plus. You simply need to connect the HDMI cable from your games console or games PC into the HDMI in port on the 4K-X. Next, connect an HDMI cable from HDMI out to the monitor you're going to be playing games on. Finally, connect the 4K-X to your computer using the provided Type-C to Type-C USB cable, ensuring that the Type-C port on your computer supports 10 gigabits per second speeds via USB 3.2. And just like other Elgato USB capture devices, you can choose to record game chat audio using the 3.5mm analog audio port. As the 4K Pro is a PCI Express card, the process is a little different. My PC already had the older Elgato 4K 60 Pro Mark II capture card installed, so I had to remove the glass panel from my PC in order to remove the old card. This allowed me to slot the new 4K Pro capture card into the available PCI Express card slot. Once the new 4K Pro card was installed, all I had to do was put the glass panel back on my PC. And just like the 4K-X, to record with the 4K Pro, you simply connect your video source, such as a games console, gaming PC or camera, to the HDMI in port, and then connect an HDMI cable from HDMI out to the monitor you want to play games on. If you are recording video footage from a camera with either the 4K-X or 4K Pro, you can connect a monitor to the HDMI out port to monitor your live camera feed in real time. To ensure both capture cards are up to date, be sure to check you are using the latest firmware version. You can update the firmware of the 4K-X and 4K Pro using Elgato's 4K Capture Utility on Windows or using Capture Device Utility on Mac. The HDMI 2.1 connection allows the 4K-X and 4K Pro to support higher resolutions and higher frame rates, and this is ultimately the main reason to choose these newer cards over the older capture cards, the HD60X and 4K 60 Pro Mark II, which they replace. What you can see here is the input and capture resolution matrix for the 4K-X. The blue tiles highlight which signals allow footage to be captured in standard dynamic range and high dynamic range, whilst the green tiles highlight which signals only allow footage to be captured in standard dynamic range. In comparison to the Elgato HD60X, the 4K-X greatly improves support for HDR. It allows you to play games at up to 4K at 144 frames per second and 1440p and 1080p at up to 240 frames per second. HDR can be recorded at 4K 30, 1440p 60, 1080p 120 and 1080p 60. If you record in standard dynamic range, you can capture at even higher recording formats, such as 4K at 144 FPS, 120 FPS and 60 FPS, 1440p at 144 or 120 FPS, and 1080p at 240 and 144 FPS. The 4K Pro cannot record at the high 4K at 144 FPS and 4K at 120 FPS rates the 4K-X supports, and its 1440p recording options are more limited too. But what the 4K Pro can do is support pass-through signals all the way up to a whopping 8K resolution at 60 frames per second. You can see from the input and capture resolution matrix that there are no green tiles, because the 4K Pro always has the ability to record in standard or high dynamic range. It also has greater support for 1080p recording. The input and capture resolution matrices and codec tables that Elgato provide for the 4K-X and 4K Pro are a great reference, but be aware that many lower resolutions and frame rates are not noted in the tables, despite being supported. For example, the 4K-X does not show support for 1440p 30 in the input and capture resolution matrix, but this capture format is listed in the associated codec table. Likewise, 1080p 30 is not even listed for the 4K-X, but it is listed as supported for the 4K Pro. I spoke to Elgato because I wanted clarification about this situation, and they confirmed that 30 frames per second is always supported by these cards, as the higher frame rates are scaled down by either the card or your computer. Bear this in mind when referencing the input and capture resolution matrices, as there are many instances where 120 FPS is noted as being supported, but not 60 FPS or 30 FPS. As always, whenever you are playing games and scaling down the resolution and frame rate in your recording, it is important to test your footage to make sure that everything looks okay. Mac users unfortunately do not get the same functionality from Elgato capture cards that Windows users do. On Mac, for example, the Capture Device Utility app is a simple capture application that lets you adjust settings, whilst the equivalent Windows application has additional device settings, gives you control over adjusting image colours, and lets you record game footage. HDR pass-through is available to Mac users, but HDR capture is not available on Mac OS, as Mac OS does not support the required video codec. This is not the fault of Elgato, but it is something that Apple users have to be aware of. At launch, the 4K-X could only record at 5 gigabits per second on computers which used Apple silicon such as the M1, M2 and M3 chip, which was again caused by a restriction of Mac OS. This issue was detailed in a YouTube video a few months ago by David Harry. Thankfully, Elgato managed to resolve the problem in the beta release of Capture Device Utility 1.3. You just need to ensure your Mac is using macOS Sonoma 14.4 or above to enable 10 gigabit per second transfers. With the 4K-X now supporting 10 gigabit per second connections on all Macs, I believe the 4K-X is a great solution for Apple users. But it is important to be aware that HDR recording is not available to Mac users at this time. Please also bear in mind that whilst I have tested the 4K-X with this M1 based Apple MacBook Pro, and I did upgrade Elgato's Mac software here to version 1.3, I was not able to test that connection issue with Macs myself. The issue where the connection was 5 gigabits per second instead of 10 gigabits per second. Now, I have been monitoring the situation on Reddit and YouTube, and it does look like the connection issue has been resolved. But the reason that I've not been able to test it is simple. This laptop is not mine. This is my wife's work laptop, and she's got many applications on it that she needs to use for work, and we're not allowed to upgrade it to macOS 14.4. So I was not able to test that issue for myself. But looking at the issue online, it does look like the issue has been resolved. Now, if you are a Mac user and you are going to be using the 4K-X, I do encourage you to check out David Harry's YouTube channel. He publishes a lot of helpful videos, a lot of tutorials, a lot of guides on recording and on video capture and sound capture and different things. So if you want to learn more about using the 4K-X on Mac, I encourage you to check out David's channel, because earlier in the year he published many tutorials on how you can use the 4K-X with iPads and with MacBooks. So I'm sure you'll find those videos helpful. So we've come to the part of the video where I give you my final thoughts on the Elgato 4K-X and 4K Pro. And I'll start off by saying thanks again to Elgato for sending these cards out to me at launch. I do appreciate it, especially as I was probably going to buy these cards anyway. But I do appreciate companies that support my channel, but it doesn't influence what I think and it doesn't influence what I say about these cards in my videos. So I've had a few months now with these cards. I've had these since launch and I've used them with all my cameras, and I've tested these with my Nintendo Switch and Xbox Series X as well, which I'm pointing down there because it's sitting over there. So I've tested these in a variety of situations, and I did recordings with 1080p, 1440p, 4K at various resolutions and frame rates, all the way up to like 120. So I've tried a variety of situations and they've just worked. I've not had any problems with these cards, which is a great thing. That's the best thing I can say about these, that they're reliable and they do what they should do. And another thing to note is that between both of these cards, there's many factors to take into account when you're recording: the bit rate, the quality settings, all these different things. But I haven't noticed any difference at all from recording with both of these cards. So ultimately, if you're going to decide between the 4K-X or 4K Pro, you're kind of deciding between a USB capture card solution and a PCI Express card solution. Of course, this does have the 3.5mm audio in port as well. But it really comes down to the type of capture card that you want. I do love the versatility of USB capture card solutions, but I also like the fact that, when it's in the PC, you don't have cables around. Well, you have one less cable. And yeah, you don't have to, worry about any kind of USB issues that Windows might put up. So there's pros and cons to both, but both of these do seem to perform in the same way. Now, there's no hiding the fact that Elgato and their parent company Corsair, they're very smart with their marketing. All of their products are very polished. They market them really well. Nice boxes, nice presentation. They've got great tutorials online. And they're quite smart in how they partner with influencers, content creators, game streamers, etc. But the reason why so many people are willing to endorse these products is because they work. And it's why I've continued to buy Elgato capture cards over the years. They're very reliable. And if you've done any kind of recording with capture cards before, you know that many things can go wrong. But for me, 99.999% of the time, if anything goes wrong, it's because my OBS configuration is wrong. I've run out of hard drive space, or something's happening with what I'm capturing, the camera or the games console. And to give you an example of that, when I was switching between both of these cards for the tests, for the footage that you see in this video, I noticed that the Xbox, for whatever reason, when I disconnected the cables and switched from the 4K-X to 4K Pro, etc., it was reducing the resolution and changing the frame rate, and sometimes it was disabling the audio. So I had a lot of footage that I just couldn't show. But that is nothing to do with these cards. It was the games console that was doing that. It wasn't these cards. So big question is, should you buy these cards? Well, if you're looking for a capture card and you don't have one just now, you can't go wrong with these. But I think everything that I said in my last video, the Elgato HD60X, everything I said there at the end of the video remains true. In that, yes, price is always a concern, budget is a concern, so you buy what you can afford. But I think it really comes down to the games that you like to play. Some games have low frame rates, some games have very high frame rates, first-person shooters, etc. And it comes down to the resolutions and frame rates that you want to play games at, and the resolutions and frame rates that you want to record at. And those are two different things. Now, as far as price goes, as I record this today, in the UK, the 4K-X is £230 and the 4K Pro is £280. Now, when I did my video of the Elgato HD60X, this was only £30 cheaper. At that price range, when these are very close in price, go for the new cards. That's what I would recommend. If these are very close in price, the old generation to the new generation, go with the new generation of cards. It's a smart move. But Elgato do discounts a lot. They do marketing campaigns, and if you find that these are like half the price of the new cards, well, now you've got a decision on your hands. You need to decide whether it's worth pouring up the extra cash to get these the latest cards, the 4K-X and 4K Pro. What I would say about that is that the last generation of cards that came out 2 years ago in 2022, well, actually, I think this one's like 2019. The last generation of cards, these do what most people need. These cards, I think for like 95% plus of people who are going to buy a capture card, these cards do what you need. They've got high pass-through rates and they support most of the resolutions and frame rates that you're going to record at. So yes, this is 4K 30. I believe this is 4K 60, of course, by the name. But bear in mind with those older generation of cards and with the newer generation of cards, if you're uploading videos to YouTube, Twitch, if you're game streaming, you are limited to 60 frames per second at this time. Now, that might change in the future. hopefully YouTube and Twitch will increase what you can stream at. But right now you are kind of limited to what you can do. And these cards, because of that, are still kind of the cards to get for most people. But let's play devil's advocate with what I just said there, because there are reasons to buy these cards as well, of course. If these are, close in price, go with the new cards. But there are reasons to buy this anyway. HDMI 2.1. Better support for HDR recording with both of these cards. Higher supported resolutions and frame rates for recording. Some people might need that. But for me, the biggest one is the last one, pass-through. Game pass-throughs have been increased. You can put through higher resolutions and frame rates, pass it through. And what that means is that you can play games at a much higher resolution, and you can play games at higher frame rates with both of these cards over the last generation. And that's not important to everyone, but to me it is. And that's why I would have bought these cards anyway. Regardless of money or anything, I would have bought these cards simply because they accept a higher resolution, a higher frame rate for playing games. Now, if you go back a couple of generations with Elgato capture cards, you go back 4 or 5 years or something, the capture cards did not have high pass-throughs at that time. So for example, if I'm playing Call of Duty on my PC, which is what I used to do then, I was playing at 170 frames per second on Call of Duty. But if I wanted to stream games, or if I wanted to record that footage or stream me playing Call of Duty, I had to play the game at 60 frames per second. I simply couldn't play at the same frame rate because the capture, it was all over the place. I wasted so much time trying to stream at the high frame rate. It just didn't work. So there was a lot of limitations in the past with that. It's not the case now. It really is not the case now. In this video, I've did a lot of tests. And I've showed you footage where I was playing games at 60 frames per second. The golf, the football, EA Sports 2024, etc. They're all 60 frames per second. But Call of Duty, I recorded at 1440p 120. I was playing at 120 frames per second, but I recorded at 30 frames per second. Now, a lot of you, if you haven't done a lot of game streaming in the past, this doesn't sound like a big thing, but that's amazing. These cards allow me to play games at whatever frame rate I want. I can play Call of Duty at super high frame rates, and I can record at very low frame rates if I want. Whatever I want, I can record with these cards. So if you're playing at 120, if you're playing at much higher frame rates than that, 160, 200, 240, you can play at those higher frame rates and just scale it down to 120, 60, 30. You can do what you want. To me, that is probably one of the biggest reasons to go with the newer cards, the newer generation over the older generation. And whilst I do like the fact that these have better support for HDR, the reality is that Twitch doesn't support HDR. And even with YouTube, you're kind of limited. Sometimes the HDR recording comes out a bit funny, just with the way things are set up. So for me, the biggest reason to get this is the higher support for pass-through. But these are just great cards. They really are. That's the best way to sum them up. Yes, they're better. Of course, they're better than the last generation, but they look identical. But internally, they have, obviously done a lot of improvements. So yeah, very happy with the cards. Very easy to recommend. I hope I've covered a few different scenarios as to whether you go with this generation of cards or the last generation of cards. Take everything into account. Do a lot of research. I've tried to give you a lot of facts and figures in this video. I've tried to give you my opinion on it, but ultimately, don't just rely on everything I say. Go out there, look at other reviews, other videos, get some other viewpoints, and that will help you make an informed decision. And if you still got questions, go to the Elgato subreddit and just post your questions there and someone will answer it. And you can ask me as well. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. But if you've got any questions about what I've said in this video, if you've got any questions about these cards, just post a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it when I see it. So thanks for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. And until next time, take care.